Let me refine the question. Is there anything redeemable about the science and the vision promulgated by Elon Musk in your view?
Well, I think he is an example of total recall. There he is fixated on the Martian memory. And the Martian memory, hello, lost the atmosphere, was run by Dracos at the time. It was a nightmare. That place is not the dream planet. Even when the Nazis had their dark fleet just after Hitler disappeared, and they tried to get a corner of real estate on Mars, they had to sacrifice thousands of humans for human slave trade just to buy a little patchwork on Mars before the Federation kicked all the Dracos out of Mars. So hell no, his trip to Mars is not the right dream right now. Hell no.
Very good. Did we get to the moon in your view? Simply.
Oh yes, I think, there were some lies in the early phases, but enough astronauts. The thing about the moon is I think those pictures of the Greys and the Dracos parked all around the crater where the first human moonwalkers go. You've seen those pictures. Those are real. The moon was absolutely crowded with the bad guys at the time when the humans landed there. So hell no, they didn't land alone. That's a scream. But the Federation did a good job of kicking the bad guys out of the moon, I think, and I think Elena Denon got that right. Remember, the moon was the Death Star in that it was hollow and metal, and you have to avoid it if you want to see it germinate, because the longitudinal gust doesn't get through, which is why eclipses are nightmares for astral hygiene. But the moon's core is run by an intelligent plasma being, which is actually a very advanced. So the moon, although, Alex Collier said we should tow it out of here, he was actually wrong. The orbit would just absolutely disintegrate. So it was actually elegantly put there and served a function, and is evolving today. And they're building there the med beds.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the main technology on the moon right now is med beds, I think.
That's fascinating. It's not the med beds that I'm here currently, as I said, witnessing here, nothing. But that's very, very interesting indeed. So the moon is spheroid or spherical?
Yeah, it's an ancient, hollowed-out planetoid, mostly titanium metal, and rang like a bell for days when NASA hit it with a hammer. And this is Andromeda's favorite thing to do. They grabbed it in a hurry after the Lesser Dryad, when they blew up Tiamat and the rain came down, and it was called the Lesser Dryad. It was the biggest flood on the planet practically, and so they had to restabilize the solar system in a hurry. So they towed that thing in here in an emergency, and the moon was definitely not there before 10 to 12.
And we know it for a number of reasons. The pock marks on the moon are only on the facing side, principally, meaning to say it was towed. The pock marks, I think, only extend 2 kilometers in depth uniformly. Doesn't matter how big the impact was, it only hit something impenetrable at 2 kilometers. Helium-3, what's that all about? Does that? Why helium-3?
Well, that was the energy curriculum of one of the Andromedan fleets, I'm sure. The point was the orbit alone of the moon is proof of intentional intelligence, actually. It was the best way, and we wouldn't have our orbit today without the moon. We desperately needed that. The solar system was literally falling apart at the time, and what happened was Enlil's team had tried to bomb the hell out of Enki's Atlantis team at the time, and Enki lost badly. And the Federation sent him in here to try to rescue and got the moon in here. But, Enki had to skip town for a couple thousand years.
Now, when was that, Dan? Because my understanding is that there's no record, petroglyph or hieroglyph or otherwise, of the moon anywhere beyond, I think, 6,000 years or something. I mean,
I thought around the 10. I thought 10 to 12,000 was my impression.
But you may be right. You may be right.
So they're saying that the Andromedans were actually the ones that brought in the moon because they had been having galactic wars, and they blew up Tiamat, and this is when we had this Tubal-Cain thing happen. It disrupted our 2 suns over our planet. So this is where we had this disruption with Venus and all of these other things. And the moon was an installation that was brought here by the Andromedans to fix the planet, because we were going to be probably in the same situation that Venus was. We were not stabilized, and so we were having cataclysms on the planet. They about blew up the whole solar system. So yeah, I can see now why the Earth is so extremely valuable to all of these groups. And basically, we're stuck in the middle of a family squabble.
But it's
Around
very,
Lesser,
very.
Lesser Dryad, Great Flood time, yes, there's no record of a moon before then. So yeah, they basically, the Federation had made a mess, a complete mess of the solar system at that point by trying to bomb the hell out of the Nebu here, and both sides lost.
Nibiru?
And
Yeah.
the solar system was falling apart fast. The water from Tiamat was the Great Flood of the Dryads, actually. And Elena and lots of people have figured, even Hancock figured that out. Hancock got it all right, except he doesn't know who done it. He always says there's this mysterious guy behind the scenes. Well, I'll tell you who that was. In every case, Hancock, it was Thoth, Tahuti Quetzalcoatl. Same guy. That's the guy that did everything you're talking about, Mr. Hancock.
So, and Thoth, just to break it down again for the stupid simple like me, Thoth was Hermes Trismegistus, was Moses, was who else?
Well, no,
who was?
Thoth was Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha and Hermes. Actually, his original name was Ishka when he was dispatched with the Anak, Enki, and Enlil, because they knew that Enlil was going to be a hell of a problem here. So they sent Ishka, who was an alchemy teacher at the time, later called Thoth, and Tehute, which became DWD, Tehuti, which is where the origin of the term line of David. So Thoth is the bloodline, absolutely, the royal family of Egypt, the royal family of the Grail, and the royal family of the Sea. It is literally directly Thoth. So Moses is in the bloodline, but that doesn't say he was Thoth. But I believe, actually, I think, and Elena and Michael Sala and JP are correct that Thoth's about, 10 feet tall, is in one of the arcs under Florida now.
Okay, did you hear that? He said that he's 10 feet tall and in one of the arcs under Florida now. And the question is he under the Mother Ark, which is number 2 in Sarasota, where I was last week when I was in my sleep? I traveled there, and this big golden being was walking down St. Armand's Circle. I wonder if this means that Thoth is coming back, and he's going to come out of the water just like I've seen, and he's bright gold like that, but not blue. So I'm not sure, and I can't remember exactly what the looks were because I was so dumbstruck looking at what I was looking at, because you have such a sense of, it's just crazy, like when you look at stuff, because it's uncanny valley, it's like seems so absurd that it takes you a moment. So yeah, maybe it was Thoth. So I'm really hoping that I can have full recall tonight, and that I can put my mind in a state of implosion so I can connect tonight, and I can learn more about this tonight. So this is really interesting stuff to me. I hope it's interesting to you as well. Dan Winter is a biologist, and he's been in the game for a long time. He's a colleague of my teacher, Phil Gruber, and I'm telling you that his information is fantastic. He's collaborated with a lot of other people that have had personal experiences, like Elena Denon, Penny Bradley.
Because the heart of the earth, which is a living, intelligent plasma being that Ea is in love with, Atun, who is the heart
Did you hear that? The World Mother.
of the earth, and that intelligent plasma being literally is the star navigator steering the plasma core heart of the earth, exactly like the highly evolved plasma being steers the heart of the sun and the heart of the earth.
That is so amazing. So I have met literally the mother and the father. I've met the bird beings and the World Mother, and they're in love with each other. Isn't that just the most beautiful love story you've ever heard? No, this is the last part, and this is pretty amazing right here. Because if you guys remember what we talked about a couple weeks ago, and we talked about today, about the wrens when we were having our conversation. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Ooh.
And why a bird's head?
Um, they called him Serpent Birdman, and the Serpent Birdman story is Quetzalcoatl, obviously, but it's also the story of Kundalini, that the serpent, the reptilian brain stem, spits the Sanchidan, the bliss liquid, literally exploding the growth of the high brain, whose wings are the crystallization of the ventricle liquid horny horns. And those are wings, and you see them on Moses, and you see them on Lucifer. And
let's not forget, Lucifer comes from Venus, right? And what they keep thinking is bull horns in antiquity is basically Lucifer or Venus, and could also be what looks like the tail of Venus that is interpreted as horns.
that indicates the completion of a Kundalini circuit, which is winged.
26,000 years.
And this was called Return of the Bird Tribes, and I knew Ken Carey quite well, and the metaphor goes on and on.
Ken Carey.
You were the first person I ever learned from about snake blood, snake DNA versus bird DNA. Does that still stand? Those two are the genesis point of everything that we see biologically?
Well, the reptilian brain stem is the source of the food for the bird brain. That metaphor is powerful and useful. Actually, I think it was Corinna Muller who went to, was it Thailand with the guy who teaches Tantra? Mantak Chia, yeah. And they drank the snake venom, the poisonous venom of the snake, and had these incredible initiations under the training of that shaman. So there's a long...
Okay, so remember in our early videos, we talked about how they used to drink snake venom to have an NDE, so they could travel into the astral world and communicate with heaven and source. And so this is another bit of proof here that snakes, their venom was used for having astral experiences and NDEs. And then, of course, you have to have an antidote, right? Which is your sacred enzymes.
History in the human, the relationship between the serpent blood and the bird blood. And that combination, as it exists inside the human, is biologically powerful. And the only way Kundalini can work is if the serpent brain feeds the bird brain, and then Quetzalcoatl returns. That's the...
So that again speaks to the bliss point of the harmonium between the negative and the positive, the left and the right, the bird and the snake. So the moon coming in becomes which element? I mean, my contention is still that the moon has been masquerading as the divine feminine and is, if anything, a masculine object. The earth, the eternal mother, the earth is the feminine. The sun, Ra, could be attributed as the masculine. So what then? We're a bit schizoid there. What's the moon, sun, and earth? Where's the polarity, duality, iconography there?
Yeah, I think the masculine-feminine metaphor kind of breaks down a bit there, particularly when you're talking about the moon, because, you know, a hollow metal planetoid artificially carved out is not exactly the archetype of the female. No, the physics is interesting, that when the moon blocks the sun, the elimination of the longitudinal coherence from the sun means a seed cannot germinate, and every magnetic line on the earth collapses, which is why eclipses are dangerous, absolutely dangerous. And the key is that...
This is why they used to follow the dung beetle, because on the 28th day of the month, you were not supposed to try to conceive a baby, because seeds don't germinate on the 28th day.
At the longitudinal coherence of the sun, which is the only thing that feeds every seed to grow, is absolutely blocked by the wrong dielectric, which is the hollow metal moon. So that's not very feminine.
Right. So then this idea, Alex Collier, you mentioned, said that, you know, the moon should be steered out. My contention has been for some years that the moon will ultimately, once we've reached harmonium and possibly moved into fifth density, I don't know, the moon no longer serves a function. In that sense, it may well steer itself away.
Well, the elegance of the orbit of the moon now sure serves a tapestry which enables planets to experience gravity relations erotically, as Gurdjieff said, explaining in part why golden ratio is the dominant geometry of all orbital mechanics. Proof I am right of the cause of gravity, plotfire.com. So the dance of orbits, the moon is serving rather gorgeously right now. And I think, Alex, at that time, the Andromedans were intensely aware of the parasites who had flooded the moon. The Greys and Dracos were running the joint, and the Andromedans were pissed, obviously. But now that the Greys and the Dracos have been ejected from the moon and there's useful stuff going there, his criticism, I don't think, applies anymore, actually.
Okay, interesting. Ormus, handbags. What the devil's going on here?
Yeah, there's a split of opinion.
We
The
talked about
handbag,
Hermes
if
today.
you believe Sisson, and I
Monatomic
believe a
gold.
few things he writes, he says the ME, which was the Sumerian term for computer disk, ME, Me Asa Ur measurement, means you took the computer disk Me, Asa queen of Ur Draco, and made a measurement with a computer disk. And what's in that bag?
Also means dog.
Now, the contravening opinion has been, yes, that's where they kept their gold powder. Either way, it's confirming pieces of the Draco culture. What we know is that at that time, the Draco were somewhat dependent on their gold powder addiction, not just for atmosphere maintenance, but for their form of immortality. But later in the Draco culture, not so. Later in the Draco culture, it was a black goo, actually, which was worse, much worse.
Black goo.
Black goo.
Yeah,
Talked about this too.
Episode of it's
Is
Dr.
this the
Who.
Harold Kautz-Vella
Harold
illusion?
Kautz-Vella.
Yes, that's right. The episode of Doctor Who where these black cubes, billions of them, dissolve all the spacecraft. Well, the black goo was a carbon nanomaterial which was phase conjugate and used by an incredibly parasitic interstellar culture, very dangerous. And the lower Draco families, not the Seacar, were horribly infested. And many of our interviewees on secret space programs have talked about the black goo. But they were using this as a communications media to feed a hive mind, a hugely parasitic intelligence. And this was a very, very dangerous carbon nano communicator. So phase conjugate materials, as in Alice and barium titanate lands, phase conjugate material, like Elena's communicator in her ear, can be incredibly powerful interstellar communicators for the good guys or the bad guys. And phase conjugate materials, because they're the place where the charge implosion can meet. And therefore, that is the ultimate communicator. It's super dielectrics, basically. And so, yeah, carbon nanomaterials, are ultimately the power of the good guys and the bad guys. And it's very important to understand how phase conjugate mirrors work, because it's how you communicate with the ancestors, the Olmec and the Aztec and the obsidian mirrors, that whole story of making phone calls to ancestors. These were all phase conjugate mirrors. And carbon powder, this black goo, is an example of a super dielectric used horribly by the bad guys and also used by the good guys.
Very interesting. And the connection between that and, for instance, the proliferation now of obviously graphene oxide being pumped into everything that any surgical needle can find its way into, the proliferation of all of these synthetic molecules, the glyphosates, the fluorides, and so on and so forth. But the 5G superstructure catalyzing black mold in the ethers, which I am told on very good authority is a real existential threat. The catalyzing of black mold everywhere at the kind of nano level. What do you make of that? Does that sound pretty in keeping with the Draco logic?
Well, actually, in that case, it's the logic of the Greys, and the Draco just tripped over the black goo, and they used the infestation for their lower colonies, but never allowed the royalty. But the physics, which is most instructive, is to study which of the materials have the highest dielectric. Even the original Spanish study that said there were carbon nano in the poison needle, Actually, they just said it was a carbon nano amulet. They didn't say. And the carbon amulet is still the point, because these are super dielectrics. And super dielectrics are the place where phase conjugate radio can implode and initiate the communication. So study the dielectric constant of, and you will learn which materials are dangerous, actually, and which ones have to be used responsibly. And it's true that our environment, because it's phase conjugation that originated life, and long-wave phase conjugation is intelligent life, and short-wave out-of-context phase conjugation is the ultimate parasite.
Oh, excellent.
So if you want to catch more of this interview, you can go to Dan Winter, D-A-N, Winter, W-I-N-T-E-R, and Sasha, S-A-C-H-A, Stone, S-T-O-N-E.